China's looking to place its military around the world to choke off India and make things very hard for the US. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. Real quick, before I begin, 5 years ago, Matt, Shelley, and I were in Hong Kong watching 2 million people march through the streets to protest the Hong Kong government and ultimately the CCP. So to commemorate it, China Uncensored is partnering with the Hong Kong Democracy Council to create the first ever digital Hong Kong Lenin Wall, a place for people around the world to show their support for Hong Kongers by writing digital post-it notes of support for Hong Kong. Again, that website is hkleninwall.com. I'll leave a link below. We built this site with a team of security experts. It's completely anonymous. It doesn't track cookies or any other personal information. It does not store IP addresses. Our goal is to get 10,000 unique posts by the end of June to show Hong Kongers that the world hasn't forgotten them. And again, to piss off the CCP. And if you've already signed, please get your friends and family to sign as well. On with the show. So, the Chinese Communist Party is negotiating with several countries on base access agreements to help strengthen the People's Liberation Army and People's Armed Police throughout the world. That's right, this is to enable overseas operations for China's military and police overseas. RAND, a think tank in the US, released a report this month detailing just how and where the CCP is looking to open these overseas bases. The report says that the PLA's primary mission appears to be securing lines of sea-based communication and trade routes from a potential blockade through 2030. Additionally, Beijing faces several challenges in turning these bases into areas for offensive action. Notably, these challenges include the political reliability of the host nations, logistical support issues, and base security. It notes that the PLA relies heavily on mobilized civilian assets for logistics, raising concerns about the effectiveness and resilience of the approach in wartime. Yet the CCP is pursuing this strategy anyway after years of military buildup and reforms. Because who needs quality when you've got quantity? Pretty sure Sun Tzu said that. As it is, the CCP has a military logistics center in Djibouti and a paramilitary outpost in Tajikistan. The RAND report also mentions countries that China is considering for more of such bases, including the UAE, Namibia, the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Equatorial Guinea, and Cambodia. Obviously, the US and some of its allies, including Australia, have been concerned about the CCP's influence in the South Pacific, Cambodia, and the UAE for some time now. Not concerned enough to stop doing business with China, of course, but concerned enough to quietly say, uh-oh, while counting their money. As China has grown closer with the government in Cambodia, that has translated to better military ties as well, which means joint military exercises. And the Ream Naval Base, where ships belonging to the People's Liberation Army Navy have been docked for 5 months. This is so concerning that US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin recently traveled to Cambodia to express his concern about the project while also stressing the need for better ties between the two countries. For those of you that don't follow military strategy, it's amazing how much of it is alliance building. It's not all bombs and bullets. Sometimes the best weapon of war is an edible arrangement. Cambodia's leadership has denied that this will be a permanent base for the PLA Navy, but the US is right to be worried, especially given China's regional aggression. And since, the ships have been there 5 months, this is like a parent saying their 40-year-old that still lives at home playing video games all day will move out and get a job any week now. A Newsweek report earlier this year also revealed that China is seeking to establish bases in Cuba, Pakistan, Tanzania, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka as well. All of these countries, along with those named in the RAND report, are strategically important to the CCP due to their location. In the cases of Tajikistan and Pakistan, China is able to monitor potential security threats from Afghan terrorist organizations to its Belt and Road Initiative. Yes, there are threats to the BRI besides China's own incompetence. Remember, Beijing had to halt work on Pakistani dams after some of its workers were killed in a terror attack earlier this year. That's kind of important, especially because China wants to deepen ties with Pakistan. But if you zoom out a bit of that Newsweek map, there's even greater significance to potential CCP bases in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Pakistan, Tanzania, and the UAE. This looks like the most high-stakes game of Connect 4 in history. They all happen to box in India, a country that both China and Pakistan detest. Not unlike how the BRI projects in Central Asia do the same, but from the north. This is going on while India is undergoing an economic and military transformation and has several border disputes along its northern borders with China, which isn't surprising since I wouldn't be shocked if Mars has border disputes with China. The CCP really operates on a Lion King, everything the light touches is ours mentality. New Delhi's ability to maneuver in the Indian Ocean could be severely hampered should China establish bases in all of these Indian Ocean basin countries. This would be especially true of Gwadar in Pakistan and Hambantota in Sri Lanka. While the Chinese base in Djibouti might be isolated from important naval supply lines and other CCP bases, both Gwadar and Hambantota are important facilities. Isaac Cardon, a senior fellow for China Studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, noted in a Brookings Institute foreign policy briefing from last year that some circles in the PLA believe that Chinese base access to Gwadar is already as good as established, and that a PLA officer even said of Gwadar that the food is already on the plate, we'll eat it whenever we want to. Well, I hope the food is cold, flavorless, and leaves them running for the bathroom, and it's all out of toilet paper. There's also the chance that Gwadar could become a long-term rest and replenishment facility for the PLA Navy, given China's direct control there and its location, even if Pakistan says they'll move out any day now. And in July of last year, the South China Morning Post reported that Hambantota Port is probably going to be China's next Indian Ocean base, since Beijing has invested over $2 billion in it and has direct control over the facility. All this would put India's sea-based nuclear deterrent at risk, especially since New Delhi was planning to make the Bay of Bengal something of a nuclear launch pad, given that the Arabian Sea is much more crowded. And in the event of a war, PLA bases in Myanmar and Sri Lanka would also make it harder for India or some other country to blockade the Malacca Strait, through which China imports a huge amount of its energy supplies and other goods. And overcoming the reliance on straits such as these is yet another reason for China's BRI initiative, especially linking it to Gwadar. Essentially, India better start sending out a lot of edible arrangements. But this isn't just concerning for India, it's also very concerning for the United States. The capabilities of the United States and some of its other allies would also be constrained. China heavily relies on energy imports coming through the Malacca Strait, as well as the Bab el-Mandeb and the Strait of Hormuz around the Arabian Peninsula. In the event of war, the US and other countries could potentially starve the CCP of its energy by blockading these straits, which would quickly end the war. But China now has a base in Djibouti and may be trying to establish bases in the United Arab Emirates, Myanmar, and Cambodia, which would make enacting these kinds of blockades much, much more difficult. Beijing could also get around many of these potential blockades through its BRI infrastructure in Central Asia, as well as through Russian gas pipelines. All of these bases in the Indo-Pacific would make it much more difficult for the US Navy and its allies to maneuver in the region, as much as it would for India. That could be devastating for US strategy to help defend Taiwan in the event that Beijing invades. But at least it's happening on the other side of the world, and the US doesn't have to worry about anything happening to them domestically. What's that, Shelley? I see. Even worse news, it seems that China's troubled container port in Freeport, Bahamas, about 90 miles from Palm Beach, Florida, could end up hosting Chinese naval vessels. That's not the worst of it. China is also seeking base access in Cuba, which is just 90 miles away from the US at its closest point. This is the most terrifying thing to happen to Florida since whatever is currently happening in Florida. China and Cuba both claim that the base is meant for joint military training, although given the history of spying on the US homeland, that's about as believable as Lucy letting Charlie Brown actually kick the football this time. China allegedly maintains a presence at several Soviet-era installation facilities in Cuba to collect signals intelligence. The Gatestone Institute report suggests the base could be used for cyber attacks and espionage operations while working with Cuba's formidable intelligence services to undertake a range of wet operations, from assassinations to attacks on US installations, even civilian facilities such as gas stations, or attacks on naval and military installations in Florida. Hopefully the Magic Kingdom fortifies its moat. Of course, then there's the risk of disrupting key military supply lines, launching missiles at the US, or shooting down American fighter jets. That could all be used as leverage should the White House decide to aid Taiwan if China invades. Now, naturally, China and Cuba have both denied that any such base exists. China maintains that its Belt and Road Initiative is a peaceful way of empowering the global South, and that they'll totally let Charlie Brown actually kick the football this time. But that might be only because of what the RAND report pointed out, which is that due to logistical issues, the PLA won't be able to fully militarize these bases until at least 2030, and quite possibly even beyond that. Given China's economic and demographic crisis, it could be even more challenging for the CCP to ever make these plans come to fruition. However, it's entirely possible that RAND is underestimating China, which is why the US and its network of global allies need to prepare for every possibility through at least 2030, because the CCP is everywhere, just like Taylor Swift. And hey, if you haven't yet, visit hkleninwall.com and leave a post-it note for Hong Kong. Link is below. Now, doing this project and this whole show would not have been possible without the support of viewers like you. On the crowdfunding website patreon.com/China Uncensored. You can contribute however much you want, but it could even be as little as $1 an episode. Every bit helps. It's what makes projects like the Digital Lenin Wall possible. And the CCP is taking notice. That's why Chinese state-run media has called China Uncensored disgraceful anti-China garbage. So join what I call the China Uncensored 50-cent army on Patreon. And as a thank you to everyone who gives on Patreon, I'll respond to one of your questions or comments at the end of these episodes. Today's comes from Mervin. Do you think guns can be a protected right in the Philippines? Now that's a really interesting question. The Philippines doesn't have the kind of Second Amendment protection to owning guns like the US, but there are a lot of guns in the Philippines. 4 million firearms in the nation of 110 million people. And recently there's been new amendments to a law to allow civilian gun holders to own semi-automatic weapons. Now in the context of China's increased aggression against the Philippines, this is very interesting. Any attempt by the Chinese Communist Party to actually attack or invade the Philippines would be met with an incredibly robust and well-armed civilian response. I know the CCP is factoring that in how it approaches the Philippines. So well-armed Philippines could be a great deterrent against China. Thanks for your question and your support, Mervin. You can join Mervin on Patreon by clicking this orange button, and remember to check out the Digital Lenin Wall. Again, the link is below. And thank you to everyone who supports the show on Patreon and for making it possible to really stick it to the CCP. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.